Time now to discuss the week in politics. On our political panel today, we've got Ben Oquist from the Australian Institute and Kurt Wallace from the Institute of Public Affairs. Thanks for joining me.
Good afternoon.
We'll begin now with the Queensland election. In 2015, Annastacia Palaszczuk was the accidental premier. Now she's marched into her third term with an increased primary vote. Her refusal to buckle on borders has clearly paid off, would you say, Kurt?
Well, I think that there's a number of things to consider here. I think that the border question has been a popular issue in Queensland, but I think that the important thing is the long-term ramifications of the border, where we have a situation where the economic consequences of keeping the border closed to people in Sydney and Victoria is going to have longer-term implications for employment, particularly in hospitality and in the issues of tourism in Queensland, which is a very important part of the economy. I think that it's unfortunately for the LNP, they're unable to attack Labor on their poor economic record, particularly when it comes to employment and spending and debt. But I think there's a number of issues at play, but ultimately I think that the Liberal government, the Liberal opposition failed to deliver an opposition message to the Queensland voters.
Just on that, Ben, what do you think should be the key lessons for the LNP coming out of this?
Well, it's a thumping win for Annastacia, isn't it? Another 4 years terms now. 3 elections on the trot, the first woman premier to do that, a 5% swing, majority government in her own right, a big win for Labor, a big win for the Greens, a bad result for One Nation, and a shocking defeat for LNP. And as you were alluding to in your first question there with Kurt, Andrea, a thumping rejection of the open borders, let it rip, let's ease restrictions prematurely brigade. That's what got defeated. And remember, though, I think the electorate's smart. It knows, as the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, once said, the best economic response is an effective health response. Voters wanted to be kept safe. And Annastacia Palaszczuk was seen to deliver that and stand up to a relentless onslaught from sections of the media, sections of the business community and the LNP, who in the end got it very, very wrong. And voters wanted some tougher COVID restrictions to remain in place for a little longer, for the borders to say shut for a little longer. That's the big takeout message. Voters backed safety and they backed a premier who was willing to stand up for that.
Yeah, and we even saw today when she addressed media, Annastacia Palaszczuk really going home on the whole keeping Queenslanders safe message, which clearly served her well right through this campaign. But if we look at how this may play out elsewhere around the country, WA's Premier today, he released a video touting his work in protecting Western Australians. We did see him slightly soften his border stance this week. But do you think this will only harden his resolve to maintain these borders as much as he can until the March state election over there? Kurt?
Well, I think that politically there may be a short-term benefit to maintaining a hard line on borders, but ultimately you've got to consider what is going to happen to the long-term economic impacts, the long-term health impacts and societal impacts of closing the border and restricting your economy, restricting people being able to get back into employment, to get their small businesses up and running again. Maintaining this lockdown on the borders is not a sustainable approach unless we're going to pursue a long-term eradication strategy with closed borders until we have a vaccine, which I think is a fool's strategy to undertake, because we don't know how long this needs to take place for. So really, if you're going to commit to closed borders, you need to commit for the long term. And if that is the case, then that's going to be an absolute economic disaster for the people of Queensland, people of Western Australia, if their governments go down this road.
Ben, what's your view on how Mark McGowan will continue going forward with this?
Well, I don't think you need to commit for the borders to be closed for the long term. Borders can be opened up sensibly as they are. Here in Canberra now, I can go to Adelaide or I can go to Tasmania. But the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian is keeping the borders closed with Victoria, as are many other states, until evidence that community transmission has been eliminated or got very low in Victoria stays put. So you've got Liberal premiers keeping borders closed with Victoria. You've got Liberal premiers opening up borders with the ACT. You've got Queensland relaxing its borders in some fashion. The borders will gradually open up as COVID is got under control. The great news is that today Australia has had its first community transmission-free day since June 9, and obviously that will mean a gradual further easing of restrictions and opening up for borders, and that's a good thing to do if you can do it safely. And that's the lesson from Queensland, and I'm sure that's the lesson that the WA Premier is taking in. Open up when it's safe to do so.
Yeah, you just mentioned there about the 0 cases across the nation. We've obviously seen 4 donut days in Victoria this week of no cases and no deaths. We've had a pretty interesting week here in Victoria. We had Daniel Andrews starting on Sunday, going from there wouldn't be easing restrictions to then easing restrictions, and of course, yeah, the free no cases today. How do you think Daniel Andrews has handled it this week? He seems to have made it through one piece.
Yeah, well, I think he has, but I think that the issue is plain to see that Victorians are expected to feel grateful for some handful of freedoms being returned to them that should never have been taken from them in the first place. There has just been no level of accountability on the part of the Victorian government in the way that they've handled the quarantine fiasco that has resulted in 99% of the cases with the massive outbreak. While the government is going with their line of 0 new cases, and this is good news, and we should feel grateful for being allowed to go outside and return to work, we still are very far from having these restrictions lifted. We've had a week now of very low case numbers, yet thousands of businesses and hundreds of thousands of Victorians are still out of work, and there is no key plan presented to the Victorian people of how we're going to get out of this situation, how we're going to return to normal. And there's just been no accountability from the Victorian government on how they've handled this situation.
Yeah, we should see restrictions ease a little bit more come November 9. But just finally, Ben, hotel quarantine inquiry, we saw this week that the reporting date, the final reporting date, would be delayed until late December. It seems like a pretty good time to sort of take out the trash when everyone's enjoying their Christmas break.
Well, we do need answers to what went wrong, team. On the basic level of accountability, we've seen a health minister go in Victoria. We've seen public servants go in Victoria. So it's not that there's been no accountability, but there needs to be more. We need to be able to learn the lessons well. But I think what Victorians overall are wanting is wanting people to get on together to fight the common enemy, and that's the virus. Now, the hotel quarantine investigation is a good way of getting to the bottom of that common enemy being the virus. And I think probably what Victorians are looking forward to between now and Christmas is people working together a bit more. And I think if we draw together the two themes we've been talking about, Victoria and Queensland, the lesson out of Queensland is people want a bit less of the hysterical shrieking at political leaders, those kind of endless calls from big business to open the borders and lift restrictions prematurely, and actually get on with fighting the common enemy, the virus. Of course, it's not all business leaders. I was struck by Lindsay Fox in Victoria over the last couple of weeks defending Dan Andrews and saying at least he's shown political leadership and urging political leaders and others to join together to fight the common enemy, that's the virus, and look for solutions. Now, hopefully the whole hotel quarantine investigation can find solutions. And I think Kurt's wrong. We are seeing a gradual plan to open up in Victoria. That's a good thing, of course. But what's most important is it's done safely. And I think political leaders who do that will be rewarded. And that's the lesson from Queensland yesterday.
Ben Oquist and Kurt Wallace, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks very much. The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
Wages are growing at their slower, sustained pace.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.